In a corner of time, when Baghdad illuminated the world with the lamps of knowledge, and the Tigris River sailed with the ink of philosophers, poets, and scholars, there were those who watched this radiance, waiting for the moment when the light would be extinguished by merciless winds and by swords that knew nothing of the language of books. This is not a narration of battles, nor a tally of victims. It is an elegy for a city that dreamed of eternity, only to fall one winter beneath the hooves of horses. In this documentary, we will walk together through the alleys of old Baghdad, listening to the wailing of books as they burned, and to the silent minarets after the call to prayer was cut off. We will tell the story of a fall that did not end the tale, but made it deeper and more enduring. In the early 13th century, Baghdad still shone like a star on the world map. A few centuries after its founding, the city had reached its peak, becoming one of the largest cities on earth in its time. Even in the 10th century, it is estimated that Baghdad held around 800,000 inhabitants. Its palaces, mosques, and schools were considered wonders of splendor, described as a marvel of the world. No matter how times changed, Baghdad in the 13th century remained a thriving capital, unmatched in culture and wealth. The city overflowed with life and thought. Scholars roamed the halls of the House of Wisdom, absorbed in manuscripts of medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. They exchanged knowledge and translated the works of the ancients. Nearby, the voices of booksellers rose in Baghdad's markets, their copyists' workshops open beneath the sky, where pens flowed endlessly across the pages. Libraries spread throughout the city. It is said that Baghdad then held dozens of public libraries and more than 100 bookshops, proof of its people's hunger for reading and research. In schools like Al-Mustansiriya, founded in 1233 CE, students came from all corners to drink from the fountain of knowledge. Within its walls, all branches of learning gathered: medicine, engineering, jurisprudence, literature. But Baghdad's prosperity was not limited to knowledge. It extended into trade, industries, and the arts. Its markets swelled with goods from every known land: spices from India, silk from China, perfumes from Arabia, gathered along the banks of the Tigris. In Baghdad's streets and markets, tongues mingled: Arabic, Persian, Turkish, all echoing among merchants and travelers, each carrying a story from their homeland. Baghdad's papermakers had learned the craft from the Chinese, then raised it into a great industry. Since the 8th century, paper mills were built, feeding the movement of writing and copying with endless resources. Ink mixed with river water on the banks, transformed into words recorded in scrolls and volumes. The artisans of Baghdad also excelled in every craft, from looms weaving golden fabrics, whose fame reached Al-Andalus, to pottery workshops creating vessels glazed with shimmering metallic luster. Amidst this vibrant scene, Baghdad became a generous home to peoples of many origins. Scholars from Arabs, Persians, Turks, and others drew from its well, sitting together at the table of knowledge without division or bias. No one asked another his country or his religion. All were bound by the passion for knowledge alone. In the gatherings of poets and men of letters, verses rose to the tunes of the oud. Tales echoed that travelers had carried from the edges of the world. In Baghdad, the stories of East and West intertwined beneath one sky. It seemed then that Baghdad was eternal, immune to decay, a city like a legend, shielded by its glory, its scholars, its libraries. But eternity is a human illusion unknown to time. On the distant horizon, a dark cloud gathered silently, carrying within it a raging storm on the verge of striking. In the far east, the Mongols were moving. Vast armies swept across lands like a storm, knowing no mercy, stopped by no force of civilization or army. One by one, kingdoms fell beneath their feet, like autumn leaves before violent winds. Waves of warriors surged from the depths of Asia, the earth trembling beneath the pounding of their horses. Their march unstoppable. For decades, the Mongols had been paving their road toward Baghdad. They had toppled great empires along their path, destroyed the Khwarezmian state, the first line of Islamic defense, and annihilated the sect of the Assassins, crushing their mighty fortress at Alamut in northern Persia. With those states and strongholds gone, the last barrier between the Mongols and the lands of Iraq was erased. Nothing remained to stop their advance toward Baghdad, the jewel that had long shone in the heart of the Islamic world. The appearance of the Mongols at Baghdad's gates was not entirely unexpected. Around 1254 CE, Hulagu launched his great campaign westward. By late 1256 CE, his armies had reached the borders of Abbasid lands. Hulagu, grandson of Genghis Khan, who inherited his ancestors' thirst for blood, turned his gaze toward Baghdad. He led massive armies, counted in the hundreds of thousands, under orders from the Mongol Empire to subdue the last stronghold of Islamic civilization in the east. Horrific reports preceded his armies. It was said that the cities they entered became ruins, rivers of blood flowing mercilessly through their streets. This dreadful march was like a nightmare, drawing closer each day to Baghdad's gates. Hulagu Khan did not arrive suddenly, nor without warning. He sent letters of explicit threats to the Abbasid Caliph, demanding surrender and disarmament. The Caliph tried to appease him with gifts and gentle words, but Hulagu's reply was harsh and absolute, a threat of invasion and extermination of every soul in Baghdad if immediate submission was not given. At that time, some voices in Baghdad warned of the approaching danger, but those warnings fell unheard. Illusion and helplessness prevailed. The people of the city could only await the unknown. Thus, it seemed the weary Abbasid state stood alone before the storm. The Caliphate had by then shrunk to the heart of Iraq. Baghdad was nearly isolated, without support from outside. All that remained were a handful of exhausted soldiers and old, crumbling walls. Baghdad could scarcely withstand the engines of war. In its quiver, there was nothing but a desperate prayer, too weak to repel them. Its people did not know the storm was already at the gates. Only a few weeks remained before the winter of 1258 CE arrived, carrying with it the day when the light would shatter, never to return. That winter, the sky over Baghdad was draped in a pale gray. The sun seemed to hide behind clouds of fear. On that cold morning, the people of Baghdad did not know that the light they lived beneath would soon be extinguished forever. The Mongol hordes encircled the city from every side, like a bracelet clasping the wrist. Tens of thousands of horsemen and warriors spread around the ancient walls, ready for the assault. Hulagu Khan himself tightened the noose, taking position at the head of his army, facing the Ajami Tower, one of the most prominent towers of Baghdad's eastern wall. His generals occupied the other city gates, Bab al-Wadi, Bab Suk al-Sultan, and the western approaches near the Al-Adudi hospital. Baghdad was sealed in a perfect siege. Deep trenches were dug around her. Wooden barricades rose to seal every outlet. No food could enter, no soul could escape. Across the camp, clouds of dust rose as the Mongols moved their massive engines into place. Their heavy catapults were anchored to the ground, ready to hurl stones and shattering fireballs. Swords were sharpened, arrows aligned in quivers, and war drums beat slowly, like the final heartbeat of the city. In moments, the first stones of the catapults flew through the heavy sky. Immense rocks and burning orbs rained down upon the crumbling walls. The ground of Baghdad shook beneath the bombardment. Sections of the wall fell with each strike. Towers cracked and split, no longer able to endure. One projectile struck the Ajami Tower itself, tearing open a breach and weakening the city's defenses even further. At that moment, Caliph al-Mustazim realized the peril had surpassed all expectation. Inside the palace walls, panic and silence reigned. The Caliph tried to salvage the moment, sending a messenger to beg for mercy, offering surrender and an end to the fight. But it was like trying to halt a raging storm with bare hands. Hulagu refused every plea. The hour of vengeance had come, and nothing would stop it. Some accounts say the Caliph did not grasp the enormity of the threat until it was far too late. The Mongol bombardment raged for days without pause. Flames rose from Baghdad's outskirts. The sound of collapsing walls echoed as each strike demolished part of the fortifications or a building within the city. Terror spread. People crowded into mosques, clinging to prayer. Others hid in their trembling homes. Food grew scarce. Water dwindled in neighborhoods as the siege dragged on. Despair crept steadily into H. Only a few thousand exhausted soldiers remained to hold back a merciless flood. Upon the walls, the Abbasid defenders loosed desperate arrows, barely visible against the ceaseless storm of Mongol shafts. It was clear Baghdad stood alone. With every passing hour, the noose tightened. Hulagu ordered new catapults to be set on the banks of the Tigris, cutting off all escape by water. The river, once the lifeline of the city, became a trap and a passage to death. Some commanders of Baghdad tried to flee for aid. Mujahid al-Din al-Dawadar, one of the Caliph's leading generals, boarded a boat under cover of night in a desperate attempt to escape. But Mongol eyes watched. As his craft drifted into the Tigris, catapult stones, arrows, and jars of burning tar rained down. The vessel ignited in the middle of the river and sank with all aboard. Al-Dawadar barely survived, wounded, swimming back to Baghdad, bringing grim news. There would be no escape. And so the days dragged on, heavy as eternity. Each day carried another piece of the city's collapse, another fragment of its fading resistance. Doubt seeped into minds. Many understood the fall was only a matter of time. Historians tell of groups within Baghdad, religious minorities, even members of the garrison, who secretly negotiated with the Mongols, hoping to save themselves. Trust unraveled. The city was no longer united in its defense. Many hearts surrendered, begging for mercy, calling desperately for aid. But there was no answer. The Caliph's final call dissolved into whispers, lost amid the clash of swords and the pounding of catapults. The light of Baghdad truly broke that day. With it, the last remnants of hope were extinguished. Silence hung for a moment. Then, the black flood of Mongols swept over everything. The fall was not only of walls, it was the collapse of an entire age, of a belief long held that knowledge could shield, that scholars could safeguard a city. Towers that had endured for centuries toppled, stones cracked beneath Mongol engines. The illusion of eternity that wrapped Baghdad shattered just as its walls did. Winds carrying the dust of battle mingled with the screams of soldiers, heralding the beginning of a long night that would swallow the city. The Mongols poured in like a black torrent, flooding streets and alleys without mercy. Some soldiers and townsfolk tried to resist, armed with whatever, swords or bows they could find. But it was as if they sought to stop a hurricane with bare hands. Thousands of arrows cut them down before steel could clash with steel. One by one, the defenders fell. The alleys filled with the bodies of those who fought to their last breath. Soon a wide breach gaped in the wall, and the Mongol hordes surged through, pouring like a raging flood. The earth trembled beneath their hooves. In an instant, they spread through every district and street, sweeping across Baghdad. The city surrendered to chaos. The invaders spared no one, child or scholar, woman or elder, library or palace. Any who fell beneath their swords met death. Even those who barred their doors did not survive, for the Mongols smashed their shelters and killed them without hesitation. They burned homes, libraries, and mosques. They destroyed markets and shops. There was not a single house that did not suffer its share of ruin. The fires spread, devouring everything in their path. The smoke of the flames rose to veil the light of the sun, turning day into a dreadful dusk. It was as if death itself framed the streets of Baghdad. Amidst the chaos, the city drowned in a sea of blood. The cries of the people mingled with the neighing of horses and the clash of swords. It is said that the waters of the Tigris ran red, so mixed they were with blood. And as the sun set that day, the corpses of thousands filled the streets and alleys in a scene beyond description. Never in their history had the people of Baghdad known a nightmare more terrifying than that day. The city fell on the day when light itself was broken and hopes collapsed. In those dark hours, the voice of knowledge, once the beacon of Baghdad, was extinguished. Those who remained alive realized that wisdom alone could not save the city from the sword. Thus, an entire age was folded away beneath clouds of smoke and the dust of hooves. As night deepened, the House of Wisdom, Baghdad's beating heart of knowledge, prepared to fall silent forever. Among the first blows dealt to Baghdad was one struck at that great library, the living heart of the city. Inside, its shelves were crowded with thousands of books, in medicine and the science of healing, in astronomy and the study of stars, in philosophy, engineering, and more. It held rare manuscripts, some of them the only copies in existence. This place had gathered the essence of the world's wisdom, ancient Greek philosophy, Persian sciences, Indian innovations, all converging in Baghdad. And then, in a single moment, all was burned. Every day, scholars had gathered there, exchanging knowledge, studying manuscripts, debating the branches of science. For centuries, they had poured the fruits of their minds and writings into this edifice, certain that knowledge was the fortress of civilization. On that dark day, knowledge could not defend itself. The Mongol invaders stormed the library without mercy. Shelves that had long embraced priceless manuscripts collapsed. Books that had enlightened generations were scattered. Many scholars died beside their scattered works. Soon flames leapt from every corner. Pages caught fire, their decorated calligraphy turning to ash in the air. Thousands of manuscripts were burned, and thousands more were hurled into the waters of the Tigris. Ink poured from their pages as blood poured from wounds. Blue ink mingled with red blood. Eyewitnesses claimed that the river darkened with the ink of the books and reddened with the blood of the people. So many manuscripts were cast into it that they piled upon each other until one could cross to the opposite bank as if on a bridge. For a brief moment, torn pages floated upon the water before they were swallowed forever. The sight of thousands of books burning in flames and drifting upon the colored river was more horrifying than words can convey. Within hours, the heritage of centuries was obliterated. Entire sciences vanished in fire and water. Baghdad stood watching its mind and its glory consumed before its eyes. It was as though knowledge itself groaned beneath the weight of the tragedy. But no one heard its lament amid the clamor of war and the roar of fire. The House of Wisdom, once alive with learning, was now silent. Its halls, once filled with the voices of scholars and readers, were empty but for smoke and rubble. The light of the House of Wisdom was extinguished forever on that ill-fated day. With the fall of this scientific sanctuary, a whole world of knowledge and civilization collapsed. A light that had shone from Baghdad to the corners of the earth was snuffed out. Baghdad's intellectual heartbeat ceased. What remained was only a heavy silence, like mourning for all that was lost. All ended with terrifying swiftness. In only a few days, Baghdad became a silent ruin. The markets no longer roared with life. The streets that once pulsed with energy were now empty, haunted by silence and desolation. Even the mosques, once filled with worshippers and scholars, closed their doors, their courtyards deserted. Silence replaced knowledge and learning. Where once books and minds had spoken, now there was nothing but stillness. Ash and dust covered the city, veiling its features beneath a dark shroud. The grand buildings that once adorned the skyline were reduced to charred skeletons. Debris filled the narrow alleys until their shapes disappeared. All that remained in the vast city were a few stunned survivors, moving like ghosts through the ruins, unable to believe they were still alive. The only sound was the whistle of the wind through the empty alleys, like the faint lament of a city mourning itself. The smell of smoke and death hung heavy, seeping into the lungs, reminding the few survivors of the horror. Even the great Tigris, once the lifeblood of Baghdad, flowed in mournful silence beneath broken bridges, carrying in its waters the remnants of the city, torn pages of books and lifeless bodies. The sun could no longer dispel the darkness of catastrophe. The light that rose thereafter revealed only a city destroyed, wrapped in the shadows of death. When the Mongols finally withdrew, they left behind a city that had become but a memory, lifeless, hopeless. Witnesses spoke of streets so filled with corpses that they became rivers of death. They told of desperate cries for help echoing among the ruins, unanswered. For days, no one could bury the countless bodies. They lay where they had fallen, turning Baghdad into a vast graveyard beneath the sky. In one corner of the ruins, a young mother knelt over the rubble of her collapsed home, clutching in stunned silence the body of her dead child. She did not weep or scream. Shock had stolen every tear, every word. In such a scene, words fail entirely. It is an ending that needs no explanation, only tears. When the dust finally settled, only a bitter question remained, echoing in the dreadful silence. What was left when the Mongols departed Baghdad? They left nothing but emptiness. The voices that had filled the markets were gone. The schools and homes were hollow shells. The city was like a body without a soul. Its streets were barren, its air heavy with the stench of fire and death. The Abbasid Caliphate, after 5 centuries, had collapsed with the fall of Baghdad. There was no caliph left, no government to guide its people. Baghdad lost its political place and became a mere province in the vast Mongol Empire. There was no house of wisdom, no libraries brimming with books. The libraries were destroyed, their treasures stolen or cast into the river. It is said the Mongols slaughtered hundreds of thousands of Baghdadis, burned thousands of manuscripts, and drowned most of them in the Tigris. The city became ruins, telling the story of a vanished glory, gone in a single night. Entire towns around Baghdad faded into memory, as if a great civilization had closed its final page. What remained, truly, after the dust cleared, was a deep, unshakable sense of loss. The sight of Baghdad's silent filled hearts with bitterness and endless sorrow. This silence was not merely the absence of noise, it was the absence of life, of knowledge, of culture. Baghdad had not been just another city to fall in war. It had been a symbol of humanity's dream of knowledge, civilization, and peace. Its fall marked the shattering of that dream upon the ground of reality. No longer was Baghdad the center of the Islamic world, no longer the fountain of wealth, nor the destination of scholars. The light that had shone for centuries was gone. The world learned a harsh lesson then. No matter how bright the light, it will not endure if left unguarded. Civilization, like a lamp, may fade if not shielded from the winds of ruin. In the dreadful void the Mongols left behind, only questions remain. History itself whispered. Was Baghdad truly gone forever? Had the city died? And yet, hidden behind that question was a faint glimmer of hope, the hint that the story was not over. Baghdad would rise again, no matter how long the pain endured. So the question lingers. Did Baghdad truly die, or would it live again? Despite all that happened, Baghdad did not die. It bled, yes, but it breathed once more, as great cities do. They may fall, but they are never erased. Baghdad remained in poems, in memories, in the few books that survived. It rose from the ashes many times, each time carrying in its eyes the trace of blood and the color of ink. In this still night, after we have extinguished all the lamps, we can still hear Baghdad's whispers, not the echo of thunderous battles, but the echo of pages burned in treachery, words swallowed by the river, and dreams of scholars whose works remained unfinished. It is a memory unlike any other, one that does not ignite anger, but stirs lips with sorrow and grief. In this silence, Baghdad calls upon us to value the light, knowledge, and wisdom we possess before their glow fades into the horizon. Just as Baghdad's light was extinguished, and as these whispers fade, we close our eyes upon the echo of Baghdad, carrying within us its eternal memory.